This is a continuation from the video that I recorded yesterday, where I was talking about how the Imperial Project has run out of juice. People in the United States don't just instinctively rally behind some military effort anymore. The phrase "support our troops" has lost the mojo that it once had. It used to be this magical kind of phrase that almost had this spell-like quality to it. Support our troops. Support our troops. And when you got roped into, well, I mean, it was clever. It was political, of course. You know, it was used in a manner. It was deployed in a manner just like men are deployed in war. This phrase was deployed in order to get people to be in support of things that they otherwise would not be in support of. That be like, well, I don't really think that we need to be in this country. We don't really need to be invading this country. We don't really need to be taking action. We don't need to be bombing that country. We don't need to be doing all kinds of things. Why are we on the other side of the world, sending our armed forces into peril? But no, support our troops. Oh, okay, you're right. Now I'm behind them, and I support what they've been ordered to do as well. This really, younger people might not get this, but that phrase really used to have a whole lot of power. It threw up this kind of force field, and it made it so that if you were against these kinds of these expansive, imperialistic, ultimately globalistic endeavors, invading the world, inviting the world, as the phrase goes, then you were unpatriotic and you wanted the troops to die, and you didn't support. You wanted the bad things to happen to our troops. But today, as I said in the video yesterday, that doesn't work anymore. I don't believe. I don't think that it can be used in that very manipulative way that it was used, both in 1991 for the first, or 1990, for the first war in Iraq, which was actually Kuwait, and then in 2003, the war in Iraq. So anyhow, as well as for various other more minor so-called police actions that have been taken since then. What I wanted to consider today is sort of a continuation from what I was talking about yesterday, and that is, what if there were a false flag today? What if the military-industrial complex, for lack of a better word to call them, maybe the assholes, we can just call them that. That would be... Because you say military-industrial complex, and people say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist if you use that phrase. Even though President Eisenhower used it in his departing address back in 1960. Was he a conspiracy theorist? I guess so. He was also the President of the United States. What does that tell you? But anyway, let's just say, if these assholes who are in charge, what if these psychopathic people without conscience, cold-blooded lizard people, maybe not literally lizards, but you know what I'm saying. What if they decided to do what I would say another false flag? When I say another, that means I'm implying that there was one before, and you bet I am, but let's not go there, because that's a subject for another day. Although if you want to read my thoughts about it, again, visit my site, 19arabs.blogspot.com, and you can hear my thoughts on that subject. 19arabs.blogspot.com. But what if tomorrow there was some massive attack somewhere, and hundreds or thousands of people died, and it was said that Putin was the one who ordered the attack. What would come of that? Would that have the same kind of effect that it had on September 11th, 2001, regardless of whether you think that was a false flag or not? I would argue no. I would argue that if this were tried today, people would instantly be questioning it, instantly be skeptical of it, instantly be noticing just how convenient it is. And they would be making themselves known and making themselves heard in all kinds of places. And it would be very, very hard to keep them down. It would be very hard to intimidate them into silence by calling them traitors or calling them, Putin lovers or something of the like. And that's when I realized that, and I think I'm right when I say this. I don't think that. Now, there of course would still be people who would be fooled by it, who would think that what they're telling you on TV and on the internet and in the mainstream media is the truth. I mean, there are still people who are taken in, who are suckers, who don't do the proper amount of sifting and discerning with these kinds of matters. But the number of doubters, the number of conspiracy theorists would be so great that it would, I think, render such an effort of the false flag. It would militate heavily against the false flag having the desired effect. And this is why, by the way, today, conspiracy theorists, so-called, are so loathed by the mainstream media, and why there is such an encouragement to hate on them, and to be actively hostile to them, and to deplatform them, which was not the case at around the turn of the century. I've talked about this before. I talked about Mel Gibson's movie Conspiracy Theory from 1997, where in that case the conspiracy theorist in question, the character played by Mel Gibson, turned out to be right about everything. And he was kind of a edgy, sort of a little bit off his rocker kind of guy, but ultimately he was endearing. Ultimately he was somebody that we liked and that we rooted for. He was a lovable nut, and he turned out to be right. Conspiracy theorists today would not be depicted as a lovable nut in a similar, mainstream Hollywood movie. Why not? Because the number of people who are skeptics, who are cynics when it comes to the official story, when it comes to the ruling class and their shenanigans, have increased in number greatly. And so the entire mood, the entire attitude is different today. Now, I'm not being Pollyannic when I say this. I'm already hearing people saying, "Yeah, I wish that were so." Says Wiki, but most people out there are just a bunch of NPCs and don't really think about anything. And I don't want to deny that there are a lot of people who are, I don't like to call them NPCs or normies or use any of those other kinds of terms, but there are people out there who don't think very much about what they're told and who just believe that since it was on CNN or ABC or CBS, that it must be true. Of course those people are out there, but they're proportionally fewer in number than they were 20 years ago. And that's really something. When I think about it now, the credulousness of the American public was such that, for those too young to remember, in September of 2001, when 9/11 took place, there really wasn't much skepticism of the official story. There wasn't any skepticism of the official story for a good several months, I would say, afterwards. Now, maybe there was skepticism, and I just wasn't as tuned into it, but I don't think so. I think my impression is that on that day and in the weeks and months after that day, nobody really thought, well, no, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right, that doesn't seem right. You know, there's this loose change here and there that doesn't add up, as was the phrase that got to be used later. I think it took a good year or so, maybe longer than a year, for any sort of alternative explanations to start making the rounds on the internet, and they were by and large not taken seriously. Now, the people who promoted these kinds of ideas were widely reviled by those in the mainstream, for sure. But even back then there wasn't much censorship. There wasn't really any censorship. I think you could, in 2003, 2004, 2005, you could watch Loose Change or September Clues. I don't know if it came out that early or not, but whatever, the skeptics of the official story who had sprung up and who were starting to talk about it at around that time. They were seen as bad people, and of course, the whole psychological method of what's come to be called gaslighting was employed against them, for sure. But they weren't seen as dangerous enough, or there weren't enough of them in number, and when they did pop up somewhere, like if somebody called into a show on C-SPAN and was going on and on about how 9/11 was an inside job or something like that, how the host would just kind of roll his eyes and so forth. That was really more the attitude towards them at the time, was just sort of, these people are just disreputable miscreants. Just ignore them. Let them have their little fun and games, but just ignore them. The attitude today is not towards skeptics of the official story is not at all like it used to be. The attitude promoted by the mainstream today is that we need to shun people who are skeptics, and statements are made by anchors of CNN and other places, political figures, media figures, celebrities, talking about how the unvaxxed, whether it's Gene Simmons or Howard Stern or whatever, saying we should expel unvaccinated people unbodged people from our midst. That kind of hatred is being promoted openly. But why is it being openly promoted so much? It's because there is such a great degree of dissent. Dissent has reached it's reached a higher echelon. And again, this isn't saying that there aren't still tons of people out there who believe everything that they're told by media sources, and who think that just because somebody is sitting behind a desk wearing a suit in a studio with a lot of lights, TV screens and beeping lights all around him, that makes him credible. And that if somebody like me is talking, you're just some guy in your car, why should we believe you? I know people like that are out there, but I'm just saying the number of number of skeptics, the number of naysayers to the official story, or questioners of the official story, has increased to such an extent that the hostility, the promoted, cultivated hostility against them has also likewise increased. But I think that those who could make a false flag happen today, could make a 9/11 style event where the destruction and death got blamed on Putin and the Russians. I think that people like that, if they're smart enough and aware enough, if they have the lay of the land, they know that won't fly today. That won't work. It's not 2001 anymore. Things are very, very different now. People are much, much more divided now, and the dissident community, wherever, whatever they call themselves, whether they call themselves left wing or right wing or whatever, they are much more of a force to be reckoned with now, insofar as making themselves known, making themselves heard, and having a willing audience. And that's why they're actively trying to deplatform them. You see, that's this is the note I want to end with. There are a lot of people, a lot of the black pillar types, who say, oh, they're just going to deplatform anybody, and they've got the power. And so if you disagree with them, if you speak your mind, they're just going to deplatform you, and that'll be the end of you, and that's why all dissent is doomed to fail. No, you have to understand the other side of the coin. There would be no need to deplatform people if it weren't acknowledged that they represented a danger. Like I said, in the early aughts, nobody was deplatforming anybody, except maybe like Holocaust deniers. And I'm not defending that. I think they should. They have as much a right to free speech, and people should respond to their points instead of just reviling them and calling them names and whatever. I'm a free speech absolutist, but I am saying that the increase in deplatforming is representative of the fact that the power of dissent is also increasing. And that is why I would argue that today, even though I'm sure there are plenty of people in the establishment who would love to stage a successful false flag in order to whip up support against Putin and in favor of basically World War III, why I don't think that would work today. And how much has changed? Isn't it interesting how much has changed in just 20 years? How much the landscape has changed in that regard. So those are my thoughts. What do you think? Let me know below. My name is Andy Nowicki. You can check out my work at altrightnovelist.com. My latest book, The Insurrectionist, can be purchased from terrorhousepress.com.